Recording. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for being here tonight. In spite of all the other exciting things that we have going on television tonight. My name is Katie Porter. You know who I am, I believe, most of you, and we are here tonight to talk about diversity in fiction. But before we begin, I would like to respectfully acknowledge and recognize our original and current caretakers of this land, water, and air, the Cahuilla, Tongva, Luiseño, and Serrano peoples, and all of their ancestors and descendants, past, present, and future. Today, the Inlandia region is home to many indigenous peoples from all over the world, and we express our gratitude to them for allowing us the opportunity to live and work on these homelands. So I also want to share a few housekeeping notes. First, please remain muted. If you are not muted, we will mute you. So please do mute yourselves. And also there is closed captioning. If you would like to turn that on, it is available via the CC icon at the bottom of your screen. And tonight we are, and you should also know that this event is being recorded and live streamed on Facebook. So tonight we are asking, how do we as writers tell the stories of characters whose lived experience is different from our own? How do we create a world within our work that's true to the multicultural spaces we inhabit without risking the misappropriation of those cultures? To talk about that, we have two fabulous writers. We have Romaine Washington, and let's see if we can add a spotlight for Romaine. There she is. Hi there. Romaine is the editor of These Black Bodies Are, which is an Inlandia Institute publication, a Blacklandia Anthology. And she's also the author of two poetry collections, Purgatory Has an Address and Sirens in Her Belly. So thank you, Romaine, for joining us.
Thank you. And thank you, Stephanie, for holding them up. Yes, it's wonderful to be here. And I'm so excited to have this opportunity to talk with Stephanie about diversity in the book, the Merveilleux book, The Journey to Merveilleux City.
So that's a good intro, because I'm going to, our next speaker is Stephanie Barbé Hammer, and she's the author of two novels, a novelette, and the critically admired mystery novella, Journey to Merveilleux City, which was just released today as an ebook for $2.99. So cheaper than a cup of coffee. What more can we ask for? So Stephanie is here to talk with us about her book and to be in conversation with Romaine. So with that, I would like to turn it over to Stephanie and Romaine, and let's give them a warm welcome.
Thank you. Oh, I see hands and clapping. Thank you. Stephanie, it's so wonderful to see you again. And I missed you at the beginning of the month, but here we are, and we're holding space together.
So wonderful to be here with you, Romaine, despite our various illnesses and things going on with us.
Yes. There's the jumping off point when you told me about talking about Journey to Merveilleux City, and you specifically asked me if when your book was coming out to read Diamond Phillips' role. And when I read it, I was like, oh my gosh, the journey, her journey, just really sat with me. And I'm going to read a little bit of it in a bit. or whenever you request. And but I want to start us off just talking about the journey of being a writer, because you also make an allusion in here as Diamond is talking to an writer, and I know I'm going to get his name. I thought I had, and I know you know the name of the writer that she mentions, because your style kind of is in his vein.
Is this her mentor that we're talking about?
Yeah, the
Yeah.
writing style with the mentor favorite.
Yes, I forgot his name too,
Oh.
and had to look it up a couple of days ago. I was like, yeah, what's his name?
Oh my
Russell.
goodness.
Russell.
You know, Russell is the name of the professor, but then the name of the gentleman that he writes like. He has a certain writing style. Oh, I love it. I'm not the only person that forgets what I've written.
Oh, I've forgotten also. No memory of who that is.
It'll come up. It'll pop up
Yeah,
again.
we'll remember.
Because I went and started reading his work after. I'm one of those people that as I read, it's a reference point for me. So my first question is, I'm reading from notes from, I read this book several years ago. It's A Stranger's Journey by David Mura, Race, Identity, and Narrative Craft in Writing. And as soon as the topic was presented to me, and I thought, I have a forum in which I can reference this and the book, that because they to complement. And so on his very first section, he talks about the search for identity, which in many ways, all of these characters are searching for something, and identity is key. And we write to articulate who we are, to describe our sense of the world, is a quote that is in the opening lines of this book. And I really felt that as I went on the journey on the train. And there is a quote that our main character, and see, I think too much like a poet and not enough written down. He says that his father, oh, it's not his father. I'm so sorry. I should have written this down. I found it. It's in chapter 4. Movies about trains make me feel safe, he said. Every train movie is an emotional journey. The journey always completes, and a better world is discovered at the end. And so both of them are talking about the journey. So you've contained everybody on this train. And I would like for you to talk more about how you crafted that journey and what you discovered about yourself as you wrote this.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Romaine. It's such a pleasure to be with you. And wow, what an amazing opening question. I think that I'm going to also refer back to the David Mura book, which friends, if you haven't read it, I also really recommend it, A Stranger's Journey, because he makes we know about the hero's journey. We've all, as writers, we've heard about that continually, but he says something so brilliant, which I think you're glossing on so beautifully, Romaine, and that is, every time we write a story, we're on a journey. Yeah. We're on a personal journey to figure out who we are, or as actually we were saying just a few minutes ago, what interests us, what we're passionate about, what concerns us. And I would have to say that I write about the search for identity a lot. And in fact, that's probably what I write about all the time in all of my fiction work, and arguably in my poetry too. But absolutely, the theme of the journey is huge. It's huge, of course, in this book. It's also big in my second novel, Pretend Plumber, which is also a journey towards identity. And in my first novel, The Puppet Turners of Narrow Interior, which is also about people journeying to a location, to a New England town where there is a half-forgotten religion. So that whole idea of journeying towards identity. And in terms of these characters all represent a facet or a aspect of the human condition that I really care about.
Yeah.
As you pointed out, one of them is herself a poet, and that's Diamond. She's a poet. She's about to finish an MFA program, and I feel passionate about poets. And I would like to see more stories about poets who I think tend to get relegated somehow to some kind of standby position. But poets are passionate, active, idealistic, political people. So that's Diamond. McKinnon, who is one of there are three big point of view characters in this novel. Diamond is one of them, and McKinnon Flores is the second one, and Mac is a teacher.
Yeah.
I am a very passionate teacher. I know you are too, Romaine.
Yes.
We are people who care so much about what goes on inside and outside the classroom. Mac wants to change the world through his teaching, but he doesn't really have a very clear sense of how to do that.
Yeah.
He's a bit lost in terms of what he has this big idea of what he wants to do, but he doesn't know how to do it.
Yes.
And
Isn't that all teaching? Isn't that all?
Yes, yes, absolutely. Which is why I think I connect with him so much, because I know that feeling. So saying I want to teach, I want to change students' lives.
Yes.
But how do I get them to do the reading? And first of all, and how do I help them? Because I have a student who's living in his car, or I have a student who is taking care of her parents, her grandparents, and her children.
Yes.
And so I think that in Mac, some of those concerns are bubbling. And then the third point of view character is a Chinese vlogger. She is from the People's Republic of China. She is a visitor. English is, of course, not her primary language, but she is also, I think, questing to find out who she might be also as a creative person.
Yes.
Because she has this vlog, she likes sharing her traveling adventures, but she also wants more than that. Doesn't quite know what it is, doesn't entirely figure it out in this book, but is going to figure it out in the next book that I'm working on, actually with my husband, Larry Behrendt. We're planning on carrying Maybelle forward as a character, because she's so curious about the world and so curious to understand more about the United States.
Yeah.
So did I answer your question, Romaine? I'm not
I
sure
think you did. You gave us, you tied that in nicely, the main characters, and then you have your change agent characters, which is the love interest of Mac's love interest, the octopus woman, and
Yes,
the other change agent, which is the gentleman that we don't see, that we don't see. So I'm
right.
gonna leave it like that.
Yes.
For those who want to read it, and hopefully everybody does or has. The next thing I need to say that I'm one of those people that goes to the back of the book, and I went to the acknowledgement section. I always do. And first I was surprised my name was in there, but
It is. You're a huge help.
But also what's in there are some of the sources for the diverse characters. And in that, I was tickled. I was so overjoyed that when you look at, you tell us. I watched Felicia Elam, an MFA classmate, and talked with her. And so Diamond isn't just something that was from observation, and then you put your views on her. you did observe, and Diamond has a really interesting quote that she says that I'm from the section I'm going to read. As a matter of fact, I hope you don't mind if I read the sections and then go back to the acknowledgement.
Go for it. Go for it. Absolutely.
Okay. And I probably should have got more water over here. Hold on just a moment. Let's see, can I do this?
Right. If only we could pass you water through the screen.
Okay, there we go. So I'm going to read two passages, a little bit from chapter 2 when we first meet her. And it's almost a checkoff list of what's going on. So it's the oldest story, and that's weird. Being a poet, the imagery and language of my life should be shiny and striking, shattering even. But this story of my life doesn't merit lyricism. It's so cliche. It's like a soap opera, only boring. He's a professor. He's my professor. Russell is my mentor. Actually, creative writing master of fine arts program. He's a little bit famous. He's not a lot older. He's married. I'm not. He's white, of course. Yes, there are people of color in power at the university, but still not that many. He has power. He has influence. People say he's a great writer. I don't know, but he's a wonderful editor, that's for sure. And he's encouraging always. He builds me up. He gives me confidence. I'm from Tennessee. I'm here because I got that fellowship, not just a fellowship, the big one. But truth is, the fellowship makes things weird. It made the other students in the program kind of glide away because they thought I was all that, not just because I'm Black, but also because I'm older. I tried to be especially nice, and it only isolated me further, just me and my fellowship. The fellowship means I don't teach, which is great, only I don't get any teaching experience. That's a weird catch. That means whatever job I get has to be based on my publications, and I don't have big or important ones. I've just got poems published in the University Creative Writing magazine. He said he'd help me because publishing is so racist, and we'll refer back to Mura's book for that one. He's handsome. He's lived in Africa. He's lived in Norway. He's been mentioned for big prizes, and he keeps on almost getting them. He's up for a grant for the National Endowment for the Arts. He's been on NPR. He was on PBS last week. He said I was pretty. My writing has gotten better. He said he would help me, and he has. I get grants to do this, grants to do that. I get slots at bookstores and little conferences. Now we are on the way to Merveilleux City, to the big writing conference and the small gem-like publishers who favor literature. Add to where the jobs are, such as they are, in creative writing, English, and related fields. He said he loved me a couple of months ago. Do I love him? A sliver of me does. But there's precious little room for emotion in that space I inhabit. And so as she talks about him, we've actually find out more about him than we do about her here, which is fine because it speaks to a dynamic that she has to navigate. And William Saroyan was the name of the writer that he favors. She says he favors later on there. In chapter 8, though, she says to him, I want to know why you lied to that girl. You told her the first time you saw her was in the observation car. You saw her earlier when we tried to exit the bathroom together. Are you telling the truth about never seeing her and the old man together? Who cares if she's pathetic? I want to know why you're always equivocating about everything. I want to know why, for all your leftist politics, you never stand up to anyone in the department or publicly stand up for any student at a meeting. I want to know why you're constantly critiquing and deconstructing at dinner parties, but you haven't shown up at a single demonstration since the Women's March. I want to know why you ordered and bought the Black Lives Matter bumper sticker, but then you removed it as soon as you got pulled over by the cops for speeding on a country road. I want to know why you won't declare what it is we're doing in this thing called a relationship. And I want to know why you haven't moved out of your house. I want to know why I am fucking you and editing your work for no good reason other than that you seemed pretty nice, are a more than average editor, and you're a semi-famous writer. But are we in love or not? And if not, then why am I continually listening to you read me your rough drafts out loud? That I don't have time for. Finally, I want to know why all your favorite writers are white men and why 3 of 5 writers you nominate for awards are white men. Yes, I'm keeping count. Yes, I'm tracking it. And that, oh my goodness, she has voice. I was like, you go, girl.
I
And
could listen to you read her all day long, Romaine. Oh my gosh.
you got her, and you got her so well. So when I read that and I thought back on Mura's book, he talks about, and I'm kind of like Katie. Well, no, Katie did go through the MFA program. I have a master's degree in education. I don't have an MFA, but I taught advanced placement literature and I have the passion. I've been writing forever, but there's something about going through a program. And when I read writers like Mura who talk about the program, who says things like in writing on page 24, that the absence of a racial marker means that the character is by default white. And he goes on to talk about how most of the writing in MFA programs is default white writers that are being read when students turn in work. And he also says, I have thought about it, but this is an embarrassing confession. I don't have very many Black friends. This is an author talking about, I've never been in love with a Black woman. I feel like if I had, I might dare write about a Black woman. So this person is saying, I don't include characters in my book from different nationalities or ethnicities because it's not my lived experience. And you don't have to have a best friend in the pocket to walk across the aisle and have a conversation or observe what's surrounding you. And there is a section where Diamond says, I've learned that being a good writer, a good part of that is eavesdropping. And I've heard Stephanie say the same thing. And so, and later on, Mura does say, walk across the aisle, talk to somebody, get to know them. Fill your book with diverse people because that's what the world is. And you do that on that train. You want to talk a little bit about what drove you that way, what mindset, what pushed you through there?
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Romaine. And thank you so much for your amazing reading of Diamond. It's just such a beautiful reading. I really feel like she just fully comes to life when you read her. I think that just coming back to David Mura for a second, he says something I think so important at the beginning of his book that I just want to be sure that Romaine and I sort of share with everybody here. And that is talking about sort of rethinking what you're doing as a writer in light not of what characters you're representing, not quite, not that yet, but who's your reader?
Mm-hmm.
And he says at the beginning, he said, particularly for white writers, you all need to start thinking about a reader who isn't white. Readers of color. You're going to have readers of color. Don't you want readers of color? Of course you do. You want to have all kinds of readers. And that piece, that shift really made a difference to me, not in any conscious way. It was just like, yeah. And it was something that I sat with, and it was sitting with it that actually created the germ that became this novel. The origins of Journey to Merveilleux City was a very tiny flash fiction story called You Are Meant for Great Things that came out in the James Franco review, which is such a hilarious idea for a review. And the guest editor of the issue that I submitted to is an author who I love and admire deeply. And that person is Rika Aoki. Rika is Japanese American, she is queer, she is trans, and she is both a poet and a fiction writer. And I got very excited because I admired her so much. I got very excited about submitting something for her to look at. And in that story is a variation on the McKinnon character. She's female at this point, but she is half Mexican and half Ukrainian, and she's broke. She is an orphaned fangirl living in a house that she's inherited from her family and kind of not quite sure what she wants to do. And she receives a message that is she's supposed to deliver to someone, and she's going to get on a train to do that. So that's kind of was the beginning of that story. But the beginning of that story, again, was thinking about, oh, I want Rika to like this story. I hope Rika likes this story and accepts it, which of course she did. So thinking about DEI is really kind of an organic thing that I think starts with the writer thinking, who am I writing for?
Yeah.
Who are the kinds of, I want all kinds of people to read me. So what am I going to share?
Yeah.
What am I going to share about myself that I can see Ruthie Marlene in my box? So Ruthie Marlene is going to find interesting, that Romaine Washington's going to find interesting. What have I experienced? What do I care about that I want to share with those readers? And that really kind of was the beginning. And that led me into doing some journaling, which again, David Mura suggests doing very officially, and I didn't do it that way, about free writing about yourself.
Yes.
And free writing about who are your people? Who are your people? Where do you come from? Who's your family? Which led me on quite a journey because, as some of you know, I'm a convert to Judaism. And when the DNA testing came through, I thought, great, there's some Jewish DNA in here somewhere. There's gotta be. Well, no Jewish DNA, but I found out that my maternal grandparents were completely lying about who they were. And I also found traces of Iranian DNA and DNA from Mali.
Oh, wow.
And I thought, okay, so yeah, there's some secrets in my family history that I don't know about. And I'm curious to know about them. And that got me interested in thinking about people who are hybrid identities, who are intersectional, who live in a couple of different worlds. And that was kind of, I should say that that Diamond showed up on the train early in the narrative.
Yeah.
And I thought, okay, am I going to talk about her in the third person? Everybody else is first person. And I thought, no. Who is Diamond? And I thought, well, Diamond shares some of the experiences of my friend Felicia Elam, who was one of 2 Black women in my MFA program. And Diamond shares some of the experiences of my very beloved student, Darnetta Bell, who was the first African-American student in the doctoral program in Comp Lit at UCR. And Darnetta was very generous about sharing her experiences with me. And so I started kind of putting together those experiences, and I thought, well, I don't know very much about being a Black woman, that's for sure.
Yeah.
However, I do know something about being a woman in an MFA program. I do know something about being a woman in a very much male-dominated graduate department. And I do know something about being an older writer, kind of trying to get going as an older person. So what I would say to folks in the audience who are thinking, I want to write about people who aren't like me necessarily, is to look for those points of intersection because they're there.
Yes.
And so that was how I came to be able to give voice to Diamond. Oh, one more thing. Dana Johnson, an amazing writer, came to Pitzer a long time ago when I was first starting out, and students asked her how many languages she spoke. Typical undergrads. They said, how many? And she said, I quote, "I speak Black, white, and professor," which I thought was right. And I thought, yeah. And Diamond absolutely speaks Black, white, and professor.
Yes.
And so that was kind of how I was able to connect with her character. And then I had tremendous assistance with McKinnon Flores, and I want to be sure I do a shout out to the women's write-in led by the intrepid and amazing Liz Gonzalez, and peopled by Ruthie Marlene, Marianne Perez, and Mary Camarillo, who were incredibly helpful as I tried to craft Mac's character. Now, I have a number of Latinx friends. I've had many, 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 many Latinx students, but I speak no Spanish whatsoever. So they became absolutely crucial readers for the beginning, for the early particularly the first chapter where Mac introduces himself, because he has an interaction with people who are native Spanish speakers. And I think it may have been Ruthie, but I read them a draft of this and they were very kind and supportive. But I think it was Ruthie who said, well, wait a minute. If he doesn't speak Spanish, if Mac doesn't speak Spanish, then how is he understanding what this woman is saying? And I said, oh, that's a good point. That's a really good point. So I had to rework the scene and actually changed Mac's character somewhat. But
so you're making a really good point there, that when you branch out, you've had experiences with people of different backgrounds, and you talk about Liz Gonzalez, but then to trust them and say, could you read this? I want to share this with you. How does this sound? Does this ring true? And you got feedback, and not all of it was, oh, we're in here, but wait a minute. This doesn't quite make sense.
Right.
And
hang on, exactly.
Yeah.
And again, another, I think, just kind of really crucial piece of this is not just, again, journaling and thinking about you are, but absolutely asking for help. Asking for help, absolutely, and either paying in money for that help, or sharing, say, I'll help you with this. I'll return the favor somehow, because I think that those insights from Ruthie, Liz, Marianne, and Mary were crucial. Liz also, I want to do more of a shout out to Liz, because Liz actually really pushed me on this. She was great. She said, okay, so Mac is Salvadorian. So what does that mean exactly? She also gave me 2 different spellings for Salvadorian, which was awesome. She was like, okay, so which one are you going to use? And she pushed me to think more about him and his Latinx connection. And so I ended up, as a result, having him be more estranged from that than he was at the beginning.
Yes.
That he really is someone who in a very real way doesn't know who he is. And in particular hasn't investigated his Latinx heritage.
At all. Yeah, there's a lot of him that is wrestling with the concept of toxic masculinity versus being assured versus empathetic. How do I navigate as a man? How do I navigate as a Latinx person, I am wearing my kilt and I'm involved in something that has absolutely nothing to do with my culture because I have no clue how I want to appear, but my teeth are sure going to be white, you know?
Right, right, exactly. Yes, my teeth
Yeah.
are just going to be amazing.
Yes, and our change agent, I love the way she addresses him on that. I won't, she does remark on that. Sorry, I interrupted. You were going through your character.
Yeah, well, thank you for mentioning the change agent, which is she's a continuation from my first novel. Allison Moot is a character in The Puppet Turners of Narrow Interior. And in that book, she has an enormous octopus tattoo on her chest. It has disappeared in Journey to Merveilleux City. And there's something of a magical realist solution to where the octopus has gone. But I made the decision not to have her be a point of view character because I wanted her to be a little bit mysterious.
Yes. And I think when you talk about liminal spaces, she is that in each of those people, we see the in-between of where they are. And she really shines the light on that. So I love that you had her be our magical realist, the symbolic magical real character in there. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. I'm so glad that worked for you. She's also the person who brings up money. A lot of these characters are worried about money, and that's something that I write about a lot. I write about money a lot.
The way you handle not only ethnicity by the inclusion of your characters, but classism as well. And please talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, back to all of these characters being aspects of the author, or certainly being aspects of the author's obsessions. I grew up in a very upwardly mobile, upper middle class Episcopalian family. And then my father lost his job when I was 15. And oh, the shame of that. And we suddenly went from being, again, aspirationally very upper class to just barely holding on to middle classdom. Was a real eye-opener for me. I'm very grateful for it in a way because it made me rethink the surroundings that I grew up in, which were extremely, extremely privileged.
Yes.
Rethink that. And then I was lucky enough to get a job at UCR and move to California and meet all different kinds of folks that I never would have met if I'd stayed in fancy ass upper class white New York. But money is a concern for most people that I know.
Yeah.
So I write about it a lot, and I show characters struggling with how to make ends meet. And even if they can, being very aware of money kind of overhanging them, probably because I still feel that way, that money kind of overhangs our lives.
There was something else that I found intriguing as you talked about classism. It wasn't just a matter of survival or comfortability. It was a matter of worth, and where they were on the train made a big difference on how they were treated and what they were afforded as far as convenience, and as opposed to the people that had to sit in the back of the train. And so you almost made me think about F. Scott Fitzgerald as I'm hearing the different places on the train. So it got to me more, not just a matter of survival, but yet another delineating line that we pretend we don't have in America.
Absolutely. I think it was, what friend of at UCR was this, who said you can talk, I think it was Steve Axelrod, who said, you can talk about anything in America but class. That's the thing you really can't talk about. Yeah. And I'm not sure I agree completely with that, but I think there's a real truth to that.
Yeah.
And so class and the realities of financial privilege and all the rank that conveys. That's something that I write about all the time. It's a real concern in The Puppet Turners, the first novel. It's absolutely a concern in Pretend Plumber, which is about a very wealthy, bi-curious teenager. And it's absolutely a factor here. Again, it's a place where very, very, very different kinds of people can meet, because we all want to be safe financially. We all want to have a place to live. And we all,
But we also want to be able to navigate the world with, when we get the police in there, and when we want to be able to navigate the world safely and
yes,
with dignity. And
Yes,
dignity
yes.
is huge in here. The theme of respect and dignity is, Diamond wrestles with it. Russell is
Absolutely.
confused by it. And we have our main character who's trying to figure it out. And then we have the people who think they know. We have the politician. You have this very slick, gleaming politician in there who seems like he knows exactly what all the right things to say and do are. And he even has, what is it, the PowerPoint in his
Right.
mind. Yeah.
Yes, where he reveals his MAGA affiliations.
Yeah.
It's only appropriate, given that the debate is going on, that, that we talk about. There is a MAGA character. There are a couple of MAGA characters actually in the book. And they're, again, back to craft, they're a bit flat, but there's also
They're humorous. They almost seem a little bit of point of humor there. There's the
Yes.
flat characters. Yeah.
Yes. That's another piece of what I try to do in this book, and what I try to do in the novels that I've written so far is, it seems to me possible to make more politically tinged remarks when you're telling a funny story. So you can be a little bit of a lefty. You can talk about race, gender, class, privilege, but it's funny. So your reader, whoever your reader is, can go, okay, well, this is not, the stakes aren't so high, maybe, or are they? And I try to change things up a little bit and have it get a little bit serious later on.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you said that they were flat characters, because there's no point of entry of empathy for either him or the cowboy, really.
No, they're just pretty awful. However, there is a man on the train who was actually the second character that I wrote. The first character is the female version of Mac, who becomes Mac. The second character is that terribly snooty older white guy sitting in first class, who is just awful.
Yes.
And he's based a little bit on my dad, just a little bit, because my dad wasn't quite that bad. He kind of wanted to be that fancy, but wasn't. He's a very snooty, very wealthy, elderly white man who has show dogs, and that's why he's traveling by train. And he's kind of awful, and yet even he is capable of change.
This is true. This is true. As we're talking about this, for whatever reason, and I didn't entertain it as I was preparing for our conversation, but I'm going to go to the police officers. And I know you had a goal with them, and who was educated, who spoke well, who was more rigid. Do you want to talk a little bit about maybe it was a part of your perspective on police, or there was a commentary that you wanted us to entertain? I'm kind of curious, and because there, again, ethnicity is melted in there too.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great point. Yes, they were, that whole plot point, series of plot points, was a very late addition to the book. But yeah, it absolutely fits in, I think, very well with the rest of it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to refer back to a movie that I just saw yesterday. Finally, it's for free on Prime, and that is American Fiction. And
yes.
if you haven't seen it, oh my gosh, Jeffrey Wright is incredible in it. The story for the movie is based on a novel by Percival Everett. I've had the pleasure of meeting a long time ago. And there's a whole running discussion in it by the Jeffrey Wright character, whose fictional name I'm forgetting, talking with his agent about how Black characters are represented, and in particular how they talk. And it's such a quietly devastating movie, and it's funny, and it's just brilliant. But I guess I really wanted to continue showing characters of color who are really, really smart and really, really, really educated.
Yeah.
In part just because I feel that that's important to do.
And
And
I particularly appreciated that it was a man. It was an African-American man that was well educated and taught. I almost now, and this is my bias, but I could be watching something and thoroughly enjoying it, and as soon as I see a Black man in prison in the narrative, I quit watching. I'd rather
I
go.
believe it.
Yeah, so it was nice to see that, and that he was very humane and empathetic.
Yeah, and is kind of, again, I don't want to give too much away, but is kind of the hero of that moment.
Yeah.
Actually,
Yeah.
is the person who understands who understands the big picture and understands what needs to be done.
Yes, yes. As we're talking about diversity and culture, I think we talked about our vlogger, whom I absolutely love. I could see her every time she opened her mouth. I could just see her. Diamond, I don't know why I want to go back to Diamond, because Diamond was like the diamond in the rough, the little nugget there. And Russell was a little side nugget as well. And I'm assuming you mentioned all three of them together as variations, the writer's voice that give us a view of that. What are you hoping that the reader takes from their presence, from their interactions and their comments?
Yeah, that's a wonderful, wonderful question. Let me start with Russell, because I was rereading some of the book to get ready for this evening. And my goodness, Russell talks like me as a professor at my most pretentious. I'm like, oh God. He makes a whole speech about, the panopticon. It's Foucault's, Michel Foucault's yard site. So
Yeah.
it's very appropriate. And he's quoting Foucault, and he's like, and I know I know the reference, or he makes, and I thought, oh God. I know I've talked like this. I know I've done that. So I kind of get my professor on a bit with Russell. And I also, I had to kind of play around with him a lot he had originally a much more extreme resolution than what he ends up with. And I had to kind of embrace my own, pretentious professorness a little bit and go, okay, because I've been that pretentious professor person, so I need to be a little kinder to him.
Can I
perhaps.
ask you something? I
Yeah.
didn't. You said you've been was it because of a point of insecurity, or because you felt the situation called for?
Oh, what a scary question. I think it's both. I think it was predominantly insecurity. Something about, I loved working in the academy, and I've been very well treated by UC Riverside, and thank you everybody for paying your taxes, so I could have a job and a pension. But I think one of the things that's hard about the Academy is that it's everybody wants to be the smartest person in the room.
Mm.
And a lot of people have been the smartest person in the room, but now here they all are together with all the other people who are the smartest person in the room. And I got over that when I had a very lovely conversation with the late Emory Elliott, who was really a brilliant guy. And he said, I'm not a genius, which is not true. He totally was. He said, I'm not a genius, but I really like hanging out with incredibly smart people. So I take my place and I try to participate and I try to do what's useful. And I thought, yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
That's the way. So thank you so much to him for that very generous comment. So enough about Russell. Maybelle was the last character created for this book.
Oh.
Because in conversation with the lovely man who I was working with as my developmental editor, and with the other lovely man who was helping me with the final plot points, namely my husband, Larry Behrendt. Larry opined, and I think he was right, that I needed some kind of frame narrator because there was so much going on. I had Mac, I had Diamond, I had these other minor point of view characters, and he felt I needed some kind of frame person to get back. We're actually back to The Great Gatsby, weirdly, to kind of bring things together. And that's how I came up with Maybelle. And Maybelle is she's really a compilation of the wonderful teachers and students that I met when I was a visiting writer in China almost 9 years ago. These, in particular, my translator had not been to the United States yet, was very curious and wanted to just know everything we had to tell her about the US. And then she came to the United States to visit. And I met her at Berkeley, and she was very concerned, rightly so, with the fact that so many people owned firearms in the United States. It really scared her. Rightfully so, but it really kept her up nights. And she would go walking with me in Berkeley and say, do you think there's somebody here who has a gun? She was very aware of this as a danger. And I appreciated that so much that I wanted to be sure that was a concern that Maybelle had.
Wonderful, wonderful. Wow. I hadn't considered that, and I do remember the gun scene. Yeah. So you talked about Russell Diamond, and okay, I wasn't sure if we had gone through the three of them. Let's talk a little bit about the minor characters. Let's talk about the characters that Liz, where they're speaking Spanish and they're expecting Mac to be able to understand and respond, and some judgments are made. And Diamond also has judgments made by her best friend on the expectations of how she should navigate and what she should be and what's going on with her. You want to talk a little bit about the questions that you raise and why you decided to raise those questions in the context of the story?
Yes, absolutely. So we were talking about Diamond or her friend. And I'm sorry, what was the first thing? I just blanked.
The first thing was the Latinx ladies on the
Of
train.
course, yes. The encounter with the women at the beginning of the book at the train station is actually a scene that I witnessed at Union Station when I was waiting for the train to go out to UCR. There was a lovely young guy, a student, who had two ladies come up to him and speaking to him very rapidly. They had a question about something. And again, I don't speak Spanish, so I don't know what the question was, but they had these and he said, I don't speak Spanish. And they were just shocked that he didn't. And I was fascinated by that. And I subsequently talked to other former students and friends who had varying degrees of ability in Spanish. And as someone interested in languages and languages as expressions of identity, I was very interested in the situation of being someone who's recognizably something, but you don't necessarily speak the language that other members of this group expect you to speak. And that fascinated me. So it was something that I wanted to be sure I brought in when I was introducing him. It was also a way, you talked about this, Romaine, to introduce the fact that he's a person who's somewhat alienated from his own history. And
Yeah.
that made that quite clear, I thought.
Yes, and it was a wonderful point, and his gleaming teeth and not quite knowing how much, and we talk about cultural appropriation, or we also talk about, that's not the word I want to use, assimilation. And how much assimilation does he need to do? And,
Right.
and how much can he go back and actually have both identities working in him? Both as male and sensitive, and both as Latinx and navigating in a predominantly white world of
Yeah.
education.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that that's a struggle that I connect with. I'm, as my DNA shows, not ethnically Jewish at all, but I am a Jew by choice. And I watch my husband and my family of choice who are Jewish really struggle with the
Yeah.
how assimilated do I want to be, and what does that mean? Who am I? And of course, it pertains to uses of language like Ladino and Yiddish. I see a note from Katie saying we need to wrap up.
Oh my goodness. Oh, okay. I'm getting comfortable.
I know, me too. I could talk for hours, but we need to let people go and eat dinner, I guess.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much, Katie, for making it possible for us to talk about diversity in this wonderful, fascinating, entertaining journey to, yeah, I have my background, journey to Merveilleux City.
And I want to say one more thing. Thank you so much, Romaine. But everybody, in case you don't know, it is Romaine Washington's birthday, and she has very generously shared some time. So please buy her book.
Yes. Yes.
Her incredible curated anthology, These Black Bodies Are. And I am now going to make you all groan.
No, you're not. No, you're not, because we're out of time.
Oh, okay. All right. You know what? Thank you, Romaine, because you don't want to hear me sing. Happy birthday, Romaine. Thank you so much for this conversation.
Yes, thank you.
And thank you to you both. I think we could have kept talking for hours. This is a really incredible topic for conversation. I feel enriched by it, and I really appreciate you both for bringing this to our Inlandia friends and beyond. So we will all see each other again soon.
Thank you.
Yeah. Oh,
thank you so much, everybody. Thank you, Romaine. Happy birthday.
Thank you.
Bye, y'all.
Bye-bye.